At a COVID-19 response meeting, President Biden told governors from around the nation yesterday that the next steps in fighting the coronavirus pandemic have to be taken by the states, not the federal government. Let's listen to that exchange with Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas.
As you look towards federal solutions that will help alleviate the challenge, make sure that we do not let federal solutions stand in the way of state solutions. And the production of 500 million rapid tests that will be distributed by the federal government is great, but obviously that dries up the supply chain for the solutions that we might offer as governor. And so just that brief comment before I turn it over to you, Mr. President.
I said, thank you very much, Ace. Look, there is no federal solution. This gets solved at a state level. I'm looking at Governor Sununu on the board here. He talks about that a lot. And it ultimately gets down to where the rubber meets the road, and that's where the patient is in need of help or preventing the need for help. We just have to stay focused and continue to work together. My message to the governor is simple. If you need something, say something. And we're going to have your back in any way we can.
Editor of National Review, Rich Lowry, pointed out on Twitter yesterday that the Biden campaign made elaborate promises in 2020 of a new widespread testing and tracing regime. The Biden campaign website called the failure to test for COVID swiftly and broadly in 2020, quote, the Trump fiasco. Here with their reactions are Team Rising. Will Jawando is a Democratic strategist and council member at large in Montgomery County, Maryland. Amy Tarkanian is a Republican strategist and former chairwoman of the Nevada State GOP. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
So, Will, the testing issue has become so important right now because, man, this strain is just super infectious, wrecking and influencing all our holiday plans. Everybody's coming down with it. Everybody wants to be able to test for the peace of mind, to know if what they have is COVID rather than some cold. And the Biden administration, rightly knocked the disaster of the regulatory approval process for early testing, for testing during the early stage of the pandemic. And now it's still a disaster. How much responsibility does the Biden administration deserve for the deplorable state of the testing regime?
Well, I think we all bear responsibility at every level of government to get tests to people. Here's the thing. You look at other parts of the world where they've been successful, there's widespread testing available. And we need that here. We have, I was fielding calls from constituents all weekend, through the Christmas holiday, my office and myself personally, people desperately trying to find tests. And I'm in the most vaccinated county of over 300,000 in the nation. And we have a great health infrastructure here and the like. And so I think criticism's fair all around. I mean, it was different things with the Trump administration just not getting approval. Now we're at the point where I think the president admitted people were caught a little off guard about how fast and how widespread Omicron's reach would be. None of us know. Everyone knows someone who has COVID over this holiday who's dealing with it. Thankfully, vaccinations work. And we're in a different position than we were when that criticism was made. But I think it's fair to criticize the things we've seen in New York and other places. There should be tests available. And obviously those who are hit hardest are those who have been hit hardest throughout this pandemic, and that's not acceptable.
And so, Amy, I had so little patience for this portion of the news cycle, and tell me if you think I'm wrong about this. But to me, the right in when it comes to COVID has been arguing the entire time that states ought to get to run their COVID response exactly as they want to. They're, if they don't want their businesses to be, able to mandate vaccines, then darn it, then they're not going to allow it. If they don't want mask mandates, they're not going to allow it. If Houston wants to do something, but the state of Texas doesn't think that they ought to do it, then the state of Texas is going to be the one that wins out no matter what Houston wants and no matter what Washington wants. But now all of a sudden, they want a national plan from Joe Biden. So do I. So do I now agree with conservatives on how to approach this?
No, I think you agree with, excuse me, I'm actually fighting a cold, with common sense, rational human beings. It's not just the right. I've heard this also from the left and from the middle. People want to be able to make up their own decisions for their livelihoods, for their own businesses, for their families. They have not been in favor, for the most part, of mask mandates or vaccine mandates. It's not a one size fits all. My son has a medical exemption because he had a stroke at the age of 5. So I am not going to give him the vaccine in fear of him getting a blood clot. But the rest of our family, we are fully vaccinated, and that was our choice. I think the fact that we had President Biden campaign on the promise of coming forth with a plan, that was something that the majority of the voters were hoping for and anticipating, because they were disappointed with the end of the Trump administration and the COVID response. Now he's failing miserably and his poll numbers are tanking, and you have midterms coming up. So now he's pivoting, punting, and pointing into the opposite direction, and now putting the responsibility onto anyone and everyone but his administration.
Well, and Biden said, we didn't play the clip of that, but he said, yeah, this is primarily something for the states to work out, which is kind of laughable because no, his view has been that it's something for the federal government to work out. I mean, OSHA is doing the federal government did a vaccine mandate, for goodness sake, one I think is kind of constitutionally suspect. So Will, how can Biden say, well, this is on the states? He's not behaved like it's on the states. He's behaved like it's, I think he wants credit. Tell me if I'm wrong. I think he wanted credit for fixing, for stopping the pandemic, but now that ended up being a lot harder than he expected. I think he expected when he took office that kind of the vaccination, and he was coming in right at the correct moment to take credit for victory over COVID. That's not happening. I was like, well, it's a state's issue.
Well, I think this is an unfortunate example of soundbite culture. Obviously, I'm sure, I watched more of that discussion with the governors. Obviously, the president acknowledges and has put forward policies that there is a large federal role in the response to COVID. You mentioned the federal vaccine mandate. I think that's a good thing. We've done that in our schools here. We're doing it with our employees. Mask mandates, go down the list. Kicking in the Defense Production Act. Getting vaccines out very quickly over the last 18 months as we've done across the country. Have things gone perfect? Absolutely not. But I think you were just hearing him say, if you listen to the whole context, that we all have to do it. Look, I'm a local elected official. I understand more than most. We make the decisions about what closes, what opens, when people go back to school. Our health department's on the front lines. We have to work together. We all have a role to play. And I think that was what that means. Now, the federal government is procuring, you heard that in the governor's question, the 500 million tests. And he was complaining like, well, you're taking too many, so we can't take enough. The supply chain issues are the reason the global economy is the way it is. So that's a problem for all of us, and it's a problem with testing. But of course, the president thinks that there's a role of the federal government. He's been leading on that. We are in a better situation than when he took office, and we just have to keep fighting it together.
Meanwhile, across the country, some Americans in need still can't get their hands on COVID testing kits. In Brooklyn last Friday, the police were called after a crowd descended on a street corner where the city was handing out free tests. According to the New York Post, Flatbush and Church Avenues are one of only 5 spots in New York where health officials were doling out tests amid a surge in demand over the holidays and lack of supply. In response to the crowd, MSNBC contributor and Dr. Uche Blackstock tweeted, quote, "This scene is caused by federal, state, and local policy failures negatively impacting the communities that need these resources the most, a largely working class Afro-Caribbean area in Brooklyn. People want to do the right thing, but the system won't let them." During yesterday's governor's meeting, President Biden again insisted that his administration could not have prepared for the holiday testing shortage, saying, quote, "But it's not enough. It's clearly not enough. If we had known, we would have gone harder, quicker if we could have," unquote. He then later denied Vanity Fair's reporting that his administration rejected a plan to boost the country's COVID-19 test reserve months before the Omicron surge all the way back in October. I don't know, Amy, what's your response? I mean, maybe Biden himself never received that particular proposal, but certainly the White House rejected it.
Right. And this is a total dereliction of his duty. This has now been going on. We're coming into 2022, and we've had, excuse me, a full 2 years of this. And he knew when he campaigned once again and made these promises that he was going to, quote unquote, fix this, and he was going to help us get through the COVID-19, that this should have been on the top of his priority list, was to have the testing available to us, have it made here within the states, quit depending upon everything being made overseas. The fact that it's not just in that area, and it's awful that that happened. That photo is very sad to see, that the people are so desperate because they just want to get on with their lives. There are so many places that will now not even allow you to go in and eat dinner, to have a meal with your loved ones, if you don't have your negative test and your vaccination card. I get it. I understand why people are desperately trying to grab for those tests that were handed out. Here in Nevada, you cannot get a test. I went online prior to coming on with you, and there is no online test available in Walgreens or CVS. If I want to schedule a test, it is weeks out in advance. What am I to do? Obviously, I know I have a cold. I don't have COVID, thank God. But what if I needed to travel? What if I needed to go somewhere that required that negative test? The fact that I have a scratchy throat isn't very reassuring to the person who needs to see that negative test to allow me to continue to live.
Yeah, and Will, we talked earlier on the show about how, now guidance is that you should only quarantine for 5 days instead of 10. Yet if you were exposed to someone who's tested positive, out of just kind of and I think what prompted that was just an admission on the part of federal science experts that, we got to learn to live with this, that you can't be trapped inside for 14 days every time you encounter someone with COVID, because everyone is getting it right now. This is so infectious, and thank goodness they're having mostly mild experiences, more mild experience with this variant than previously. But what do you say to this? We gotta get things back to normal. We're not going to have COVID zero. We're not, the herd immunity is a lie. We're not going to suddenly have this thing go away. Hopefully there won't be another wave after this, and that people getting it will create some additional buffer or immunity buffer. But this has to be taken out of the policymakers' hands to some extent, or at least the hands of the people who are going to shut down everything, close schools, that kind of stuff.
Well, a lot in that question there, but I'll say this. Look, that picture is abhorrent, and it is a failure of government at multiple levels. And unfortunately, of our larger debate, I think a lot of people got sucked into, and I know I get it on Twitter and everything else every day. We've held the line here. We've kept our indoor mask mandate against a lot of pressure. We've kept, our standards for that. You see DC recently put it back in. Other places are putting it back in because of the surge in Omicron.
Oh, I know.
And I think that the problem is that because from really legitimate reasons, people want to get back to their life, there was this kind of let's move past COVID, and everyone fell into it, including the administration. Everyone fell into it to some extent, some more violently and aggressively than others. And people, they got caught on their heels. The president admitted that we didn't expect this the way we did, and they should have. And I'm not going to say, sugarcoat that. But I will say that the same people who are now saying, well, where are the tests, are the same people who said, I don't want to wear a mask and I don't want to necessarily get tested and have all this stuff. So you can't have it both ways. And those people in Brooklyn, just like they should have had access to the vaccine earlier, I put forward a proposal early in COVID that when we didn't have a lot of vaccine, that Black and Latino residents who died 10 years younger from COVID when they contracted it should have access to the vaccine, just like we preferential older residents. The governor blocked my effort to do that. We need to have an equity lens on access to vital resources, but it shouldn't be the point where you can't get them. And that's what happened in the case in Brooklyn, and that's unacceptable for any resident of our nation.
All right, well, we got to leave it there, although we'd like to get into that at a future date. Will and Amy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.